So here we got a ribeye. I'm going to show you a couple ways you can do this to cut steaks out of it. So usually the smaller end right here is really good for roast if you're going to do something like that. So if somebody wanted a roast, you could probably take that smaller end. It's a lot better, it has a big cap. And I wouldn't recommend having your butcher cut this off and then tie it back on. If you cut this hole, it keeps the flavor in better. Like you wouldn't cut a steak, take the bone off, cook it with the bone tied to the steak. No, you would cook it all together and then slice it after. So that's just my recommendation. Another way is to use your knife and kind of pre-cut these. So this one's kind of at an angle right here, so I'm just gonna cut it at that angle. So you pre-cut them to the bone. This one kind of goes all the way through. Usually it's every other two that go all the way through. So they're pre-cut, and all you got to do is take it to the saw and just cut the bone off. The reason I think this method is better is you don't need to scrape sawdust off of here, and it's a much nicer cut because you use a knife instead of having the saw cut the meat. You use your knife and it's just a cleaner cut, but you can choose whatever way you want to do it, in my opinion. So the first steaks that we cut, obviously you're gonna have to take the sawdust off, so you have to scrape them. That we pre-cut, they're ready to go. You just trim and they're good. Maybe a little bit. So these here are the ones that we cut on the saw. And these are the ones we cut on the knife. not much difference. I could see it a little bit, but pretty much it comes out the same. It's just this way you need to scrape, and this way you don't need to scrape. And it kind of, I could tell it looks a little better, but whichever way you want to do it, that's your way. Like if I only had to cut this, I would always pre-cut them and then just cut the little bone off on the saw. But sometimes you need to cut like 100 of these, and I'll cut them all on the saw if that's the case, if that makes sense. Let's say you didn't need all bone-in steaks, then you could take the bone off here, so you scrape, basically scraping up against the bone. Make sure you get the least amount of meat as possible, and you just cut the ribs off. Got a nice boneless piece that you can cut your boneless ribeye steaks out of. This was the end piece, so anytime you got the end, I always scrape that off. Sometimes they leave a little bit of sawdust at the plant, so you want to make sure you scrape that side off. And then you get your boneless steaks out of that. Sometimes you need to trim them, sometimes you don't. These look pretty good. I need to trim a little bit. And then your ribs, you could leave it like that. I usually like to cut them between the bone. Tray them up like that. So there you have it. You got your bone-in ribeyes out. Showed you the two ways to cut it. Those are the ribs that we trimmed off. And by trimming off those, we got our boneless ribeye steaks out of that. Really good marbling on those. And that's the bone-in ribeye.